Hi, Gemini. Wow. I have to say this reading feels incredibly emotional right from the start because the energy coming through isn't just about missing someone. It's deeper than that. It's the energy of someone finally realizing what they lost. And honestly, I don't think this realization happened overnight. It feels like something they've been trying to avoid for a long time. Something they've been pushing to the back of their mind, but they can't ignore it anymore. Okay? Because while you've been focusing on yourself, healing, growing, and moving forward with your life, this person has been left alone with their thoughts. And that's where everything started to change. I keep picking up on someone replaying old conversations, old choices, old moments they wish they could do differently. It's almost like they're seeing the connection through completely different eyes now. You know, sometimes people don't fully understand what they have until they create enough distance to feel the absence of it. And that's exactly what this feels like. There is a lot of regret here, a lot of reflection. And for some of you, I wouldn't be surprised if this person has been quietly watching from a distance, trying to understand why they can't seem to move on from what happened between the two of you. Because no matter how much time passes, no matter how much they try to distract themselves, their thoughts keep leading them back to you. And as we move into the cards, wow, the story that's unfolding here feels incredibly powerful. I keep coming back to this feeling that someone has been carrying around far more regret than they've allowed anyone to see. Because the moment I see the Five of Cups, it's almost like I'm watching someone sit alone with their thoughts after spending a very long time trying not to think about what happened. You know, sometimes people stay busy because they don't want to feel. Sometimes they keep moving because stopping would mean facing the truth. And honestly, that's what this feels like. This person has spent a lot of time convincing themselves they were fine, convincing themselves they made the right choice, convincing themselves they could move forward without looking back. But something isn't working anymore. Something keeps pulling their attention back towards you. And I have to say, the energy feels heavy, not dramatic, not chaotic, just heavy, like someone carrying around a weight they can no longer ignore. The Nine of Swords keeps showing me these moments when everything gets quiet, the distractions disappear, the noise fades, and suddenly they're left alone with memories, conversations, moments, things they wish they had said, things they wish they had done differently. There is a lot of replaying the past here, a lot of asking themselves why. Why did I say that? Why did I walk away? Why didn't I fight harder? Why did I let pride make decisions that my heart wasn't ready for? Wow. It's almost like they're having conversations with a version of you that only exists inside their mind now. And the strange thing is, the more they think about you, the more difficult it becomes for them to justify what happened. Because distance has given them perspective. Time has given them perspective. They're beginning to see things differently than they did before. The Page of Swords appears, and immediately I get this feeling of observation. Quiet observation. This doesn't feel like someone making their presence known. This feels like someone paying attention from a distance, looking, watching, wondering. Maybe through social media, maybe through mutual friends, maybe through little pieces of information that somehow find their way back to them. But regardless of how it's happening, their attention keeps returning to Gemini. And every time they see evidence that you're continuing to grow, continuing to live, continuing to move forward, something inside of them reacts. Because I don't think they expected you to become this strong. I don't think they expected you to stop carrying the connection by yourself. I don't think they expected your silence to feel this loud. Okay, that's important. Your silence feels loud to them. Not because you're trying to prove a point. Not because you're trying to punish anyone. But because they became so used to your presence, so used to your effort, so used to your understanding, that the absence of it created a space they can't stop noticing. And then we have the moon. And honestly, this card changes the atmosphere completely. Because now I start feeling everything they don't say out loud. Everything hidden beneath the surface. Everything they've tried to keep under control. There are emotions here they haven't fully admitted to themselves. Feelings they've tried to rationalize. Feelings they've tried to explain away. Feelings they've tried to replace. Yet somehow they keep returning. Again and again and again. I almost feel this person looking at their own life and realizing that something important is missing. Not because everything else is falling apart, but because something meaningful left a mark on them. Something genuine stayed with them. And now they're beginning to understand that not every connection can be replaced. Not every person can be forgotten. Not every goodbye feels complete, because the energy surrounding this person feels unfinished. Like a chapter they thought was over, but somehow keeps reopening every time they try to close the book. And Gemini, The strongest thing I'm feeling right now isn't desperation. It isn't obsession. It's realization. Slow, uncomfortable, deep realization. The realization that they may have let go of something far more valuable than they understood at the time. And the deeper they sit with that truth, the harder it becomes to look away from it. Because there is another layer of this story that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And honestly, that's where the energy starts becoming even more interesting. Because the more if I sit with this energy, the more it feels like someone is finally starting to question the story they've been telling themselves. And honestly, that realization doesn't feel comfortable at all. The Seven of Cups comes forward and immediately I'm seeing confusion. Not the kind of confusion that comes from not knowing, the kind that comes from listening to too many voices, too many opinions, too many people telling them what they should think, what they should feel, and what they should do. I keep hearing someone say, maybe I should have listened to myself, and wow, that sentence carries a lot of weight. Because there was a time when they didn't trust their own instincts. There was a time when they allowed fear, outside influence, and other people's perspectives to become louder than their own heart. And the strange thing is, deep down, I think they knew it. I think part of them always knew. But knowing something and acting on it are two very different things. You know, sometimes it's easier to follow the crowd. Sometimes it's easier to convince yourself that everyone else sees the situation more clearly than you do. Especially when emotions are involved. Especially when the connection feels intense. And this person keeps showing me that energy. The energy of someone who doubted themselves. Someone who doubted what they felt. Someone who doubted what they saw right in front of them. The Justice card appears and the atmosphere shifts again, because this doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like awareness. It feels like someone looking back and seeing the chain of decisions that brought them here. One choice, then another, until one day they find themselves standing somewhere they never expected to be. Looking around and wondering how everything changed so much. I almost feel this person revisiting old memories from a completely different perspective. Memories that once seemed insignificant. Conversations they dismissed, warnings they ignored, moments they brushed aside because they weren't ready to hear them. And that's where the Queen of Swords steps into the reading. Honestly, the moment I saw her, I immediately thought of Gemini. Not because of what she says, but because of what she sees. This person is beginning to realize that you noticed things long before they did. You picked up on energies, patterns, people's intentions, situations unfolding beneath the surface. And there were moments when they questioned your perspective. Moments when they assumed you were being overly cautious, or overly direct, or maybe even overly protective. Yet the more distance they've had from those situations, the more they start seeing exactly what you were trying to show them. I have to say, that realization feels emotional, because it's one thing to discover you've made a mistake. It's another thing entirely to realize someone tried to help you avoid it. The Six of Cups brings in this softer energy, and suddenly I'm seeing memories that feel warmer, quieter, more meaningful. Not grand gestures, not dramatic moments, simple things. Conversations that lasted longer than expected, feeling understood, feeling safe, feeling like someone genuinely cared. Because what they're starting to understand is that your intentions were never complicated. Your care wasn't complicated. Your loyalty wasn't complicated. The connection itself may have felt complicated at times, but your heart wasn't. And that understanding is creating a kind of sadness I wasn't feeling before. Not because they believe everything is lost. Not because they're focused on an ending, but because they're recognizing how many opportunities they had to trust what was right in front of them. How many moments they could have chosen differently. How many times they could have listened more closely. And honestly, the deeper this awareness becomes, the harder it is for them to keep blaming circumstances, or timing, or other people, because the truth keeps leading them back to the same place, back to themselves, back to the choices they made, back to the things they were not ready to face. And the energy surrounding them feels like someone standing in front of a door they once walked away from, quietly wondering what might be waiting on the other side if they ever found the courage to look again. Because the energy shifts dramatically here. I mean, wow. The moment the tower appears, it feels like life has stopped allowing this person to hide from themselves. And honestly, I don't even feel like this is only about the connection anymore. This feels bigger. It feels like cracks beginning to appear in places they once thought were solid. Relationships, beliefs, habits, ways of thinking. Things they once defended without question. Things they once relied on. It's almost like they're looking around and realizing that some of the foundations they built their life on were never as stable as they believed. And that's a difficult thing to face. You know, People can avoid emotions for a long time. They can distract themselves, stay busy, keep moving, keep making excuses. But eventually, life has a way of bringing us back to ourselves, and that's exactly what I feel happening here. The tower doesn't feel gentle. It feels honest, painfully honest, because some truths arrive quietly, others arrive by tearing down everything that no longer fits. And I keep seeing this person standing in the middle of change they didn't expect, trying to understand why things are unfolding the way they are, trying to understand why old patterns are no longer working, why certain people suddenly feel different, why certain situations suddenly feel empty. And that's when judgment enters the reading. Okay, this energy feels powerful, not because someone else is calling them out, because they're calling themselves out. They're beginning to hear their own conscience more clearly than before. The voice they've ignored, the feelings they've pushed away, the truths they've buried underneath fear, pride, and distraction. I keep hearing this internal conversation, a conversation nobody else can hear. Questions they ask themselves when they're alone, questions they can't easily answer, questions about who they've been, questions about who they want to become. And honestly, some of those answers are uncomfortable, because awakening rarely feels comfortable at first. It asks people to look directly at parts of themselves they would rather avoid, the parts that made mistakes, the parts that hurt others, the parts that ran away, the parts that stayed silent, the parts that knew better but chose differently. And I have to say, they're starting to see all of it, not through blame, not through shame, but through awareness. The death card appears, and the energy becomes even deeper. Because something inside this person feels exhausted, exhausted from carrying old versions of themselves, exhausted from repeating the same cycles, exhausted from pretending certain feelings don't exist. I almost see them standing between two versions of their life, one that feels familiar and another that feels unknown. The familiar version offers comfort. The unknown version asks for change, and that's where the struggle lives. Because change sounds beautiful until it becomes personal, until it asks something from us, until it requires us to release what we've outgrown. And this person knows that, whether they admit it openly or not. A part of them understands they can't keep carrying everything they've carried. Before, certain fears don't fit anymore, certain excuses don't fit anymore, certain masks don't fit anymore. And that's creating a transformation that feels both painful and necessary. The hermit steps forward and suddenly everything becomes quieter. The outside noise starts fading, the opinions, the distractions, the chaos, the need to explain everything. I keep seeing someone spending more time alone than usual, thinking, reflecting, questioning, searching, not for answers from other people, but for answers from themselves. Because something important is happening inside of them. Something that doesn't need an audience. Something that doesn't need validation. Something deeply personal. And the more they sit with themselves, the more they begin connecting dots they couldn't connect before. Events that once felt random. Experiences that once felt unfair. Mistakes that once felt meaningless. Pieces of the story are starting to make more sense. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But enough to shift their perspective. Enough to help them understand that what felt like destruction may have been creating space for something entirely different. And honestly, the more this awakening unfolds, the more it starts bringing them face to face with someone they haven't been able to stop thinking about at all. And that's where the energy becomes surprisingly tender. Because after all of the noise, all of the confusion, all of the internal battles this person has been fighting, I keep seeing them arrive at a much quieter realization. A realization that has less to do with losing something and more to do with finally understanding what it meant. The star appears and the atmosphere softens immediately. It's almost like they're looking back at the connection from a place they couldn't access before. A place beyond fear, beyond defensiveness, beyond the need to be right. And for the first time, I feel them allowing themselves to appreciate what was actually there. Not what they were afraid of, not what other people told them, not what their doubts projected onto the situation, but what was genuinely there between the two of you. And honestly, the more they look at it, the harder it becomes to ignore how much Gemini impacted their life. I keep hearing them replay certain conversations, not because of the words themselves, but because of how those conversations made them feel, seen, understood, encouraged. There was something about your energy that challenged them to think bigger, to expect more from themselves, to imagine a future they weren't always willing to imagine on their own. And I have to say, not everyone appreciates that kind of influence when it's happening. Sometimes people only understand it after enough time has passed. The Queen of Pentacles comes forward and I immediately feel this deep sense of stability. Not perfection, not someone who had all the answers, just someone who consistently showed up, someone who cared, someone who offered support without constantly asking for recognition. And wow, this person is beginning to realize how rare that actually is. Because they've encountered many people throughout their life. People who wanted something from them. People who came and went. People who stayed only when it was convenient. Yet your presence feels different in their memories. There was a reliability there, a sincerity, an energy that didn't need to be loud in order to be meaningful. I almost feel them comparing experiences without even meaning to. Comparing how they felt around other people versus how they felt around you. And that comparison keeps leading them toward the same conclusion. Something about Gemini felt real. Something about Gemini felt safe. Something about Gemini felt honest. The Strength card appears, and this is where emotion starts rising to the surface. Because they're beginning to understand something they didn't fully recognize before. Your strength was never about controlling them. It was never about forcing them to become someone else. It was about believing in them during moments when they struggled to believe in themselves. You saw potential they couldn't always see. You saw possibilities they dismissed. You saw qualities they overlooked. And honestly, that kind of support can be difficult to appreciate when someone is still running from themselves. Because accepting that support requires vulnerability. It requires trust. It requires letting another person see parts of you that aren't fully healed. And I think that frightened them more than they were willing to admit. The Ten of Cups enters the reading, and suddenly everything feels very personal, very emotional, very human. Because this person isn't only reflecting on what happened. They're reflecting on how they felt, and that's different. I keep feeling them, remembering moments when life felt lighter around you. Moments that seemed ordinary at the time. Moments they may have overlooked. But those memories have taken on a different meaning now. They carry warmth, comfort, connection, a feeling of belonging. You know, there are certain people who leave an imprint on your heart without even trying. Not because they're perfect. Not because they save you. But because they make you feel understood in a world where that's often difficult to find. And honestly, that's exactly what this energy feels like. This person is beginning to understand that your value was never measured by what you did for them. It was measured by who you were, by how they felt when they were truly themselves around you. And the more that understanding grows, the more another question starts forming inside of them. A question they may not be fully ready to answer yet. Because appreciating someone's importance is one thing. Figuring out what to do with that realization is something entirely different. Because that's where the conflict becomes impossible to ignore. The moment the Knight of Cups appears, I can feel emotions that have been sitting beneath the surface for a very long time. Emotions that are no longer satisfied staying hidden. And honestly, this feels less like someone trying to impress you and more like someone trying to find the courage to be honest. I keep seeing words they never said, conversations they rehearsed in their mind, messages they started writing and never sent, moments when they almost reached out, almost opened up, almost admitted what was truly sitting in their heart. And wow, there is something incredibly vulnerable about this energy. Because this person is no longer fighting their feelings the way they once did. They're fighting their fear of being misunderstood, fear of being rejected, fear of discovering that too much time has passed, fear that the version of themselves standing here now may not be enough. The Page of Pentacles steps forward and immediately I see effort. Not perfection, not grand promises. Effort, small changes, personal changes. The kind nobody applauds because most people never see them happening. I feel this person looking honestly at areas of their life they've neglected for a long time, responsibilities, habits, patterns, choices. Things they know they need to improve. Because the energy doesn't feel like someone who simply wants Gemini back. It feels like someone asking themselves whether they are becoming the kind of person capable of protecting what they value. And that's a very different question, you know. It's easy to miss someone. It's easy to romanticize a connection. What's harder is taking responsibility for the version of yourself that participated in the distance. And I think that's exactly where this person is standing. They don't seem interested in pretending everything was somebody else's fault anymore. They're beginning to understand their role in the story. The Temperance card appears and everything slows down. The energy becomes quieter, more reflective, almost patient. I keep hearing someone say, I don't want to repeat the same mistakes. And honestly, that sentence feels more important than anything else they're thinking right now. Because there are moments when emotions rush forward. Moments when they want immediate answers, immediate relief, immediate resolution. Yet another part of them knows healing doesn't work that way. Growth doesn't work that way. Trust doesn't work that way. Some things require time. Some things require consistency. Some things require becoming a different person instead of simply making different promises. And that's what they're wrestling with. Part of them wants to close the distance. Part of them knows they still have work to do within themselves. The Two of Swords arrives, and suddenly I can feel the tension. Not because they don't care, because they care more than they're comfortable admitting. This feels like someone standing at a crossroads inside their own mind. One part of them says, go. The other part says, wait. One part says, speak. The other part says, what if it's too late? One part believes in possibility. The other still remembers disappointment. And honestly, that internal conversation feels exhausting. I almost feel them carrying this invisible weight every day, trying to determine what the right thing is. Trying to understand themselves before asking someone else to understand them. Trying to become stronger than the fears that once controlled their decisions. Because beneath all of these cards, beneath all of these emotions, there is one thing that keeps showing up. Not urgency, not obsession, not fantasy, intention. A sincere desire to become better than they were before. Not for appearances. Not to prove something, but because they no longer want to keep repeating the same cycles that led them here. And the more they grow into that awareness, the more another realization begins taking shape. One that has less to do with who they used to be, and far more to do with the choice they may eventually have to make about what truly matters most to them. Because eventually, every internal battle arrives at a moment where avoiding the truth becomes harder than facing it. And that's exactly what this energy feels like. The Lovers appears and the entire reading becomes incredibly clear. Not simple, not easy, but clear. Because this person is no longer questioning what they feel. They're questioning what they're willing to do about it. And honestly, those are two completely different things. I keep seeing someone standing face to face with themselves. Not the version they show the world. Not the version that makes excuses. Not the version that blames circumstances. The real version. The honest version. The one that knows certain choices create certain outcomes. The one that understands that meaningful connections require participation, require vulnerability, require courage. And wow, that awareness feels profound because I don't feel someone running anymore. I feel someone becoming tired of running, tired of carrying unfinished emotions, tired of pretending they don't care, tired of acting like distance solved something that still lives inside their heart. The Three of Pentacles steps forward, and immediately I begin feeling a completely different mindset, a more grounded mindset, a more mature mindset. Because this energy isn't focused on fantasy. It isn't focused on what sounds beautiful. It's focused on what can actually be built. You know, there's a huge difference between wanting a connection and being willing to contribute to one. And that's what keeps standing out here. This person is beginning to understand that meaningful relationships aren't maintained by feelings alone. They require effort, presence, consistency, accountability, the willingness to show up even when things aren't easy. I almost hear them reflecting on moments when Gemini carried more than their share of the emotional weight. Moments when Gemini showed up. Moments when Gemini tried. Moments when Gemini offered understanding. And that realization creates something I haven't felt earlier in this reading. Respect. Deep respect. Because they're beginning to see how much strength it took for Gemini to remain open-hearted through situations that were often confusing and emotionally demanding. The Six of Pentacles enters the reading, and I immediately feel balance becoming important. Not perfection. Balance. This person keeps asking themselves questions about reciprocity, questions about fairness, questions about what it means to truly meet someone halfway. And honestly, those questions feel necessary, because growth isn't only about recognizing mistakes. Growth is also about learning how to create something healthier moving forward. I feel them understanding that love isn't measured by intentions alone. It's measured by actions, measured by consistency, measured by whether two people are genuinely supporting one another. And that understanding is reshaping the way they look at the connection. The Wheel of Fortune appears, and everything begins feeling larger than one moment, larger than one decision, larger than one chapter. I keep seeing someone reflecting on how much they've changed since the beginning of this journey. How differently they see themselves, how differently they see Gemini, how differently they see the choices that brought them here. And honestly, there is something humbling about that realization, because life has a way of teaching lessons we never expected to learn. Sometimes through joy, sometimes through loss, sometimes through distance, sometimes through reflection. Yet every experience leaves something behind. Every experience asks something of us. And this person feels like they're finally understanding what life has been asking them to learn all along. Not about perfection, not about control, not about having all the answers, but about authenticity, responsibility, and choosing what truly matters before fear makes the choice for you. I have to say, the energy here feels very different from where this story began. Not because everything has been resolved, not because every question has been answered, but because awareness has replaced denial, and that changes everything. Because once someone sees the truth clearly, the heart has a difficult time pretending it doesn't know what it knows. And the feeling surrounding this reading is that of someone standing at the edge of a new chapter, quietly realizing that the next decision they make may reveal more about who they have become than any decision they've made before. And that's where we're going to leave the reading today. Honestly, this story feels less about what someone might do next and more about what they've finally come to understand. Because sometimes the most important shifts happen quietly. They happen inside the heart, inside the moments nobody else sees, inside the conversations we have with ourselves when everything becomes impossible to ignore. Whether this resonates with your situation or simply offers something to reflect on, I hope it gave you a little clarity, a little comfort, or maybe even a new perspective. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I truly appreciate every single one of you. Take good care of yourself, keep trusting your own journey, and keep choosing what feels genuine and true for you. I'll be back very soon with another reading. Until then, Gemini, be gentle with your heart, okay? Bye for now.